Viewers, have you ever imagined what it would look like if a president used his army, not for war, not for weapons, but to plant seeds? Yes, this is not a scene from a movie or a novel. It's a real story that shocked the entire world. In the year 2025, the president of Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, made a decision that changed the course of history. For the first time, military helicopters were not filled with guns or missiles, but with bags of corn seeds. And instead of dropping bombs, they rained those seeds over dry deserts. The sight was so strange, so unbelievable, that those who saw it were stunned. Some called it madness, others thought it was just a show. But for Ibrahim Traoré, these seeds were not just grains. They were the symbols of life, hope, and freedom. He wanted to show the world that to win a war, you don't always need weapons. Sometimes a single seed can start a revolution greater than any bullet. So let's tell you the full story of this corn revolution, where seeds falling from the sky changed the destiny of an entire nation. For decades, Burkina Faso had suffered from hunger and poverty. The hot desert winds had turned fertile lands into dust. Rivers dried up, farms disappeared, and entire villages were forced to leave their homes. Mothers wept as their children cried from hunger. Fathers walked miles to distant cities searching for work. The same land that was once known for its green pastures had become a silent desert. International aid agencies made promises of help, but those promises only gave temporary relief, never a real solution. Hopelessness is spread everywhere. People began to believe their land would never turn green again. And then at that very moment, Ibrahim Traoré made an announcement that stunned the world. He said, "We will no longer depend on anyone. We will bring our land back to life ourselves." Many laughed at him, some called him crazy. But that was the moment when the corn revolution was born. Helicopters were prepared, but instead of bombs, they carried bags of corn seeds. As they flew over the desert, thousands of tons of seeds began to fall like golden rain upon the sand. The villagers couldn't believe what they were seeing. Children ran around collecting the fallen seeds. Women raised their hands toward the sky, whispering prayers, and men clapped and shouted with joy. Still many doubted, could seeds really grow in such dry soil? Critics mocked the plan, saying it was a waste of resources and pure madness. But Traoré replied, "This madness will be the foundation of our freedom." And then came the day everyone was waiting for. The rains arrived. The desert that everyone thought was dead began to breathe again. Within weeks, tiny green sprouts began to appear where once only sand existed. Birds returned to their nests, pastures revived, and herds of deer came back to graze on the fresh grass. The villagers celebrated as if it were a festival. Drums echoed, songs were sung, and children ran joyfully through the fields, plucking young corn cobs. This was not just the success of a single harvest, it was the rebirth of a nation. That night, as the people sat around their fires, roasting corn, they weren't just eating food, they were tasting freedom. It was the first flavor of self-reliance. And that's how the madness of Ibrahim Traoré gave birth to a new hope, a new Burkina Faso. The plan had begun to take shape, but Ibrahim Traoré wasn't only trying to change farming, he was trying to change nature itself. He had conceived an extraordinary idea, a plan to turn the desert sun into rivers. He called it the rivers of the Skirsipas. If the rain will not come to us, he said, then we will bring the rain down ourselves. Many were stunned by his words. Some laughed. Others called it madness, the same kind of madness that always gives birth to history. But Traoré did not argue. He simply began. Massive containers were built. Special condensers and sky cooling machines were installed. Local engineers, hundreds of them, joined the project. In the first stage, large net-like structures were erected across mountains and plains. During the night, these nets captured moisture from the cool desert air. It seemed simple, almost primitive, but it worked. As the sun set, the nets slowly gathered water from the wind, and by dawn, through small condensers, that invisible vapor turned into drinkable water. People were astonished. The same sand where nothing once grew was now pulling water from the night air. Then came the next phase, airborne technology. Government scientists released small aircraft designed to condition and expand specific clouds, turning them into sources of rainfall. This process, called controlled cloud induction, was carefully organized so that rain would not fall only in one area, but across farmlands according to need. At first, there was criticism. Opponents called it weather manipulation. They said, "You're playing with nature, this could end badly." But Traoré replied calmly, "We've already waited 100 years for change. It's time we try something, even if it means failing forward." And when, after the first year, dry lands that hadn't seen rain for decades gave birth to small, shimmering rivers, all doubts disappeared. Tiny conservation ponds appeared. The levels of groundwater rose again. And most importantly, the children of the villages were returning to the fields. Mothers no longer had to walk miles for water. Men were back working their lands. And the youth, once desperate to leave for the cities, were now seeing new opportunities right where they belonged. Traoré then transformed the water project into a full-scale economic program. Water was no longer just for drinking or irrigation. It became a source of power, industry, and progress. Small hydropower generator units were installed, bringing electricity to rural homes. Water wheel pumps provided continuous irrigation, boosting crop yields through new machinery. Women-led cooperatives emerged, building small businesses around water-based products, salt purification units, vegetable processing centers, and fish farms. Meanwhile, river-like transport channels were built, creating an entirely new, affordable way to move goods. People who once spent whole days traveling from village to town were now using small boats to carry their handmade goods to larger markets. The social impact was remarkable. Access to clean water in schools improved children's health. Fresh vegetables became part of school meals. Women, once confined to the background, now managed water units in small factories. Their leadership in local communities grew stronger, and with it, their independence. For the young men and women of Burkina Faso, the coast was no longer the only road to survival. They became engineers, technicians, and water specialists, building their future on their own soil. Even the international stage began to take notice. At first, global aid organizations were confused. Their traditional channels of charity were no longer needed here. Burkina Faso was learning to stand without a handout. Soon, the same international aid agencies that were once skeptical returned, this time to learn from Burkina Faso. Other nations began testing the model in their own lands, and neighboring African countries proposed creating a joint river network so that through regional cooperation, the fear of drought could finally be reduced. Traoré seized this opportunity with diplomatic brilliance. When a nearby country faced severe drought, Burkina Faso offered its water technology and machinery in exchange for seeds, tractors, and renewable energy projects. This strengthened friendships across borders and proved that solidarity could be built not on aid, but on shared strength. Of course, challenges came too. Some condensers failed. In certain areas, groundwater levels fluctuated dangerously, and a few politicians tried to use these problems for their own gain. But Traoré's team didn't break. They faced every challenge with their communities. Rules for water usage were created. Departments launched audits to ensure fairness. Educational programs were started to teach water conservation. Environmental engineers redesigned the system so that it could automatically adapt to climate changes. When humidity dropped, water was transported from large reserves through canals and boats. And when heavy rain came, excess water was stored in new backup ponds. Slowly, this project transformed into a new national pride. Every year, during the season of water, people marched through villages in celebration. They gathered along the riverbanks to pray, and their traditional songs carried gratitude to the skies. Stories and poems began to speak of the rivers of the sky. Children in schools heard these tales and dreamed of becoming engineers and weather scientists one day. Near mosques and temples, small fountains were built, and drinking cool, clean water became a sacred act of thankfulness. Economically, the impact was immense. Water-fed farming boosted crop yields. Agricultural processing increased exports. And with stable water supply, investors arrived. Factories rose in small towns. Local markets flourished. Banks began offering agricultural loans to farmers. The government reinvested the new profits into health and education programs, and the quality of life began to rise steadily across the nation. Ironically, the same Western countries that once mocked the project were now standing in line, asking to offer technical support. But Traoré had one firm condition: foreign investment must come under local control and ownership. He refused to sell land. Every project included a community share. This political wisdom kept foreign interests in check and ensured that control of water, the lifeblood of the nation, remained in the hands of the people. In the end, this was more than a story of water or engineering. It was the story of a nation's courage and its unshakable belief in itself. When a people begin to meet their own needs, they become free from all external chains. Ibrahim Traoré proved that great solutions don't always come from wealth or powerful institutions. Sometimes they are born from a simple dream, relentless effort, and faith in one's own people. The rivers of the sky became a living reminder that when humans decide to rise, even the desert can learn to flow again. And perhaps the most beautiful truth of all is that when a river carries the story of its people within, that river teaches the nation how to live again.